Well, let's get to what's happening in Iran now, where the regime has been violently cracking down on protesters. The death toll now reaching at least 648 protesters, but could be much, much higher. A 23-year-old university student, Rabina Aminian, is among the first of the killed protesters to be identified, shot in the back of the head by riot police under the direction of the regime, according to an Oslo-based human rights group. But while these brave Iranian men and women risk their lives to call for their basic rights and dignity, the usual activists who march on our streets are nowhere to be seen. Human rights lawyer Arsen Ostrovsky and the head of the Sydney office of the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council, who many will remember as one of the victims of the Bondi terror attack, has written a powerful piece in News Corp papers calling out this hypocrisy. Ostrovsky writes, if the so-called human rights champions cannot find their voice when heroic Iranians are bravely confronting tyranny in the streets, then perhaps it is time to stop pretending they care about human rights at all. Arsen Ostrovsky joins me on the desk tonight. Arsen, great to see you, and I hope you're okay after what happened at Bondi.
Thank you. I'm healing. It's surreal that it was a month ago, but you know the scars will go, but the healing will take a long process, and it's time to fight for the Australia we love and cherish, not the one we saw under attack on the 14th.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Australia in a moment, because you're also fighting for the rights of the people in the Middle East, in Iran. And there have been some demonstrations in Sydney in support of Iranians here. There was one that our crews filmed today outside the US consulate in Sydney, but these are comparatively much smaller and mostly attended by Iranians themselves, and it must be said, some Jewish supporters too. We even filmed a woman at that protest today who lamented herself this deafening silence while she spoke to our reporter, Crystal Wu.
They've been massacred on the street! Just wake up! Just wake up! They need to wake up! I cannot understand, and the West is just sitting. We need to be that voice!
As you heard there, she said the West is just sitting there. Why do you think there has been such silence from the usual activists who've been marching every week in support of Gaza?
It's a great question, because these people who have marched every week, supposedly in support of Gaza, stand up as champions of human rights, of peace and justice. But where are they when the Iranians, brave Iranian men and women, are standing up and fighting for the most basic human rights and dignity against the most repressive and brutal regime? Where are they? Where is the march across Sydney Harbour Bridge? Where are the rallies of Federation Square? Where are the protests outside Parliament House? For them, it's far easier to blame Israel. For them, it's far easier to blame the West for all the ills of the world. But when it takes courage to actually stand up for what is right, for actual people who are being oppressed, whose human rights and basic rights are being denied, they are silent. And that silent equals complicity.
And you know what's ironic, or perhaps understandable, is that some of the strongest supporters of the Jewish community here and Israelis have been Iranians themselves, who understand what it's like to be brutalized by a radical Islamic regime. And now we're seeing a lot of Jewish groups support, in turn, the rights of the Iranian people against this regime.
Look, absolutely. You know, this Iranian regime of Ayatollah Khamenei is the single greatest threat to world peace. It is not only a threat to the Middle East, to the region, exporting terror, death, destruction, but it is also one of the most brutally repressive regimes, denying their own people basic rights. They spend billions of dollars on exporting weapons and rockets and terror across the world, but yet they can't spend a fraction of that money on their own people's welfare, on access to water, on their basic economic rights, on allowing women to walk freely across the streets. So if you
without a hijab.
Without a hijab. So those that profess to care about human rights at the weekly rallies condemning Israel for every ill they can possibly imagine. They're nowhere to be heard, and their silence really is deafening.
Yeah, it speaks volumes too. Let's talk about the Adelaide Writers Week, which has this afternoon been cancelled entirely amid the growing fallout from its dumping of anti-Israel academic Randa Abdel Fattah from next month's program. The festival's board has now also been dissolved following today's resignation of director Louise Adler. Now, her resignation followed the walkout of more than 180 scheduled participants and half the board. In a statement, the Adelaide Festival, which oversees the Writers' Week, said, as a board, we took this action out of respect for a community experiencing the pain from a devastating event, that community being the Jewish community and the event being Bondi. Instead, this decision has created more division, and for that, we express our sincere apologies. Abdel Fattah, though, Arsen has rejected this apology, and she's called the decision to cancel her racist, and she's engaged lawyers. What do you make of this whole implosion of the Adelaide Writers' Week?
Look, it's terribly sad, the situation that we've arrived at. Writers' festivals are meant to be, forums for free speech, exchange of ideas. But sadly, over the years, they've become hubs where anti-Semitism has become so widespread and entrenched. Now, it should not have come to this, but it has, and partly, in large part anyway, over years of platforming writers who, instead of exchanging in ideas and robust debate, have actually sowed discord and disunity and hateful language targeted specifically against the Jewish community. Now, obviously, we shouldn't have to come to this, but it has, and at a time when we should be coming together to heal, especially as we still mourn the 15 people who were murdered in the Bondi attack, this really wasn't a time to only pour more fuel on this division.
Well, I think Abdel Fattah should never have been given an invite in the first place. After the past 2 years, she's just poured fuel on the fire of anti-Semitism. She posted a picture of a Palestinian paraglider the day of October 7, and it hasn't stopped since. So it's a wonder she was invited. They should have known this could happen, but there you go. Look, I mentioned earlier how you were among the victims of last month's horrific terror attack in Bondi, Arsen. Now, some of the other victims and their families are speaking out. Shana Gutnick, whose father, Reuben Morrison, was killed as he bravely tried to protect others by throwing bricks at one of the gunmen. She's called for the federal government to set up a new compensation scheme for the relatives of those murdered in the attack. Currently, close relatives of those killed, they're eligible for up to $75,000 in payments, but that's from the New South Wales government in a joint package with the federal one. And this figure was called ridiculous by another victim's relative. Do you think up to $75,000 is enough for the relatives, close relatives of those who were killed in this horrific attack?
Look, I actually came to the studio from Bondi and went back to the scene where this happened, where I myself was shot. Look, there's no number that can ever do justice to the pain, the trauma that we as a community suffered. Certainly not for those who lost loved ones, and for those, including like myself, that were injured, that were shot, and that are in a long recovery process. It's not just the physical scars, it's also the emotional scars, and it's not also just us, it's our family members and it's our community, and that process will be long-term, and it will require not only medical bills, it will require all sorts of specialists, because it's a long process, and there is no number that will adequately do that justice. But certainly, any help from the government is, I think, a welcome.
Yeah, and many people might not realise that a lot of those victims were themselves lived in housing commission. They're not well off. They could use the support from the government. So let's hope that they get more of what they think they need.
Sure.
Arsen Ostrovsky, thank you so much, and good to see you doing well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.